Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, which is Certified Business Analysis Professional. My name is Varun, and I hope you are finding my YouTube tutorials helpful for your CCBA, ECBA, and CBAP examination. So let's continue. So far, so good. The techniques that we have completed, you can see all the completed techniques here in a center and the right side, and we'll continue with some of the remaining techniques, which is data flow diagram. Today we'll cover data flow diagram, the sequence diagrams, and the use cases and the scenarios. So what is data flow diagram? So data flow diagrams shows where data comes from, which activities process the data, and if the output results are stored or utilized by another activity or external entity. Data flow diagrams portray the transformation of data. They are useful for depicting a transaction-based system. Uh, let's leave those statements and let's in a layman language, let's talk about what is data flow diagram. So as part of your role, since many of you are working with either the manufacturing domain or the service industry or software industry, so everywhere the data flow diagrams comes into picture. So data flow diagram is nothing but the flow of the information from one point to the another point. And the data flow diagrams, it could be like a high level data flow diagram, which is like the bigger the helicopter view of representing something, the flow of information, like from one department to the another department. These are the high level data flows. So when you go deeper into this, then it says like it's level 1 data flow diagram, level 2, level 3, and level 1 is nothing but the high level data flow diagram, and when it goes to level 2, it's like further digger deeper into the detailed information, and level 3 is more detailed, right? So this way we say data flow diagrams, that these are level 1, level 2, level 3. So there are two type of data flow diagrams. One is known as gain search on notation, and another is Jordan notation. Before going to these two terminologies, let's read it through and now understand it in a technical way. How it is, what is data flow diagram? Data flow diagram shows where data comes from, right? Which activities process the data, and if the output results are stored or utilized by any another activity or external entity. Data flow diagrams portray the transformation of data. So the data comes into that is being processed in any of the department, in any of the process. The data is being transformed, like you are getting input into a text-based file, but when you process it, you are transforming it to some Excel-based file, right? Or any, the code-based file. They are useful for depicting a transaction-based system and illustrating the boundaries of physical, logical, or manual system. The data defined should be described in a data dictionary. Uh, so the data dictionary is nothing but the description or the definition of information, whichever been represented in the data flow diagram. If something, any of the keyword that is mentioned in the data flow diagram, that definitely should be part of the data dictionary. Data flow diagrams can consist of, and remember the question may comes like, okay, where this data is being represented, the something is being shown in data flow diagrams. So you link it, data flow diagram, the terminologies, the topics that is in data flow diagram is also being described in a data dictionary, right? So these are like, you can correlate if any question comes in. The data flow diagrams can consist of multiple layers of abstraction. The highest level diagram is a context diagram, which represents the entire system. Context diagram shows the system in its entirety. So as I said, like level 1 diagram, or also known as the context diagram, these diagrams are the high level diagrams. I would say the helicopter view of understanding something. That's a context diagram or level 1 diagram. You go deeper into the information, that is known as level 2, level 3, level 4, right? So now let's move to the context diagram, which is gain source on notation, and a level 1 diagram, which is Jordan notation. So you here can see both. The left side is the gain notation and the right side is the Jordan notation. So what is the difference in between? The difference is nothing, but you can see the center process here. In the gain notation, there is only one data process that represent all the processes in between. Whereas in the Yoda notation, the big process is now being divided into the sub processes along with the data store where the information would be stored. So what is the data store? Data store is a kind of a database which is a kind of a data repository that, and this is like definitely there would be one input that is going into the data store and one output that is coming out of the data store. So there would be one arrow going in and one arrow coming out of the data store. So this means the information coming into the data store stored there and then moving out and giving that information to some other external data or external agent. So these are the two, and remember level one, it is like the high level representation of the data flow, whereas level two, level three, if you go deeper into this, this is more detail oriented diagrams. And by the way, what is verb and the noun? You will find the concept modeling, and here on top of this you will find the video link or YouTube link where I have given the definition and explain the concept modeling. Please don't forget to check it out. And uh, and you can clearly see that external agents, then the output data, input data. So you can say external agent is nothing but any of the source where from where the data we are consuming the data, the process is consuming the data, or the external agent could be the point where the data is being sent and the consumer of the data, right? So external agent could be any of these two. uh, and same thing goes for the Yoda notation as well. Now, what are the elements inside that? You can see the external, the entity source and the sink. So sink is nothing but the destination where the data need to be sent and the consumer of the data. So external, the source from where the data originates, the input originates, right? So external, that could be external agent as well. The data store, as I said, data store is a database which stores the information, that takes the data as an input and also gives out the data to the external agent as the output. So what is the process? Process is where the data is being executed, the data is being used and transformed into something else. And the data flow, the flow of the information represented by the Jordan and the gain notation is known as the data flow. So what are the pros and the cons? The pros, it's a good way to define the scope of the system and all of the systems, interfaces, and user interfaces that attach to it. Relatively easy to understand, helps to identify duplicated data elements or misapplied data elements, illustrates connections to other systems, helps define the boundaries of a system, can be used as part of system documentation, and it helps to explain the logic behind the data flow within a system. What are the weaknesses? Using data flow diagrams for large scale system can be complex and difficult for stakeholders to understand. Different methods of notation with different symbols could create challenges pertaining to documentation. Does not illustrate a sequence of activities, and the data transformation processes say little about the process or the stakeholders. So when we say the data is being transformed within a system, though it shows the processes, but it says very little about how the data is being transformed, right? Does not illustrate a sequence of activity. The sequence of activity only represented by the sequence diagram, which is the next slide or the next technique we'll discuss on that. Different methods of notation with different symbols could create challenges pertaining to documentation. It could happen like the data flow diagrams is in different organization uses different set of symbols notations, right? So that is not standardized, I would say, which definitely creates a confusion. Using data flow diagrams for large scale system can be complex and difficult for stakeholders to understand. So these are the weaknesses. Let's move to the sequence diagrams. Sequence diagrams are used to model the logic of usage scenarios by showing the information passed between the objects in the system through the execution of the scenarios. A sequence diagram shows how processes or objects interact during a scenario. The sequence diagram shows how objects used in the scenario interact, but not how they are related to one another. Sequence diagrams are also often used to show how users interface components or software components interact. Sequence diagram, as a name uh, says, like sequence, so something in a chronological order, right, one after the other. And it's like first activity, second activity, how the controls are flowing within a system. uh, so it's basically represent the flow of the information that is passed between the point A to point B or to point C or between the objects. uh, The sequence diagram shows how objects use the scenarios interact, but not show how they are related to one another. So this line is very important. It says that it only shows how the information uh, is being transferred from point A to point B, but it does not show how they are the components or the objects which is transferring the information is related to one another, right? So the what are the elements of the sequence diagram? Well, the first one is the lifeline. You can see here the rectangle, which is definitely the start, and the vertical dashed line represents the lifeline. And then we have the activation box. Activation box is again a vertical rectangular box with an arrow that says the timeline of the process. This is the starting point, and wherever you see the cross icon here, that represents the ending of the process. Okay. We can see it in this big diagram here, but before that, let's talk about the third element, which is the message. The message is in two form. One is the synchronous message and another is the asynchronous message. The synchronous message always followed by the acknowledgement. Let's say this object 1 and object 2. The object 1 is the sender and object 2 is the receiver. Object 1 sending the message to the object 2, but object 1 cannot send another message when we say the synchronous message. Object 1 can only send the synchronous message only when the object 2 sends back the acknowledgement of the first message that is sent by the object 1. So synchronous message always wait for the acknowledgement from the second object in order to send the second message, right? So that's the synchronous message that is followed by the acknowledgement, right? Which is also known as the response. You can see here, right? The object one is sending the message and this is synchronous message. So obviously the object one as a sender, if has to send another message, then the response of the first message need to be received first. And then the asynchronous messages that does not wait for any response or the acknowledgement, that keep on sending the messages one after the other, but the terminal will able to receive one message at the time. So in this case, object 2 can send messages, asynchronous message one after the other, but the object 3 will receive only one message at a time. Synchronous and asynchronous, and here we can talk about like lifeline. The object one is now this is the lifeline, right? The we are talking about the object one. Now the dashed line represent here with the rectangular vertical box represent here when we say the call. It's an activation box. This is an activation box, and here this is the entire timeline up to which this object will be running, right? And you can see the messages, the exchange of the messages in between, which is represented by the execution prefixation, and you can see at the end where its cross icon say it is a basically the termination of the process, which is also known as the destruction, right? So now what are the pros and the cons? The pros: it shows the interaction between the objects of a system in the chronological order that the interactions occur, shows the interaction between the objects in a visual manner that allows the logics to be validated by stakeholders with relative ease. Use cases can be refined into one or more sequence diagrams in order to provide added detail and a more in-depth understanding of our business processes. Now, what are the weaknesses or the cons? It's that time and efforts can be wasted creating a complete set of sequence diagrams for each use case of a system, which may not be necessary, right? Have historically been used for modeling system flows and may be considered too technical in other circumstances. So, third, we have the use cases and the scenarios. Use cases and scenarios describe how a person or a system interacts with the solution being modeled to achieve a goal. So, many of you might be aware and familiar with the use cases and when we say the stories. So what are the use cases? Use cases are nothing but when any requirements comes into the picture, we generally hypothetically assume, okay, that is the user and the need or the requirement of the user is to do this. For an example, like you are a customer of any of the bank, and as a customer, what do you want from the bank? You want to check your accounts, you want to download the statements, you want to transfer the funds, you want to receive the funds, you want to set the transaction limit, you want to use the debit cards. These are the use cases, right? Uh, so use cases are nothing but the requirement from the perspective of the user. Use cases and scenarios describe how a person or a system interacts with the solution being modeled to achieve a goal. Use cases describe the interactions between the primary actor, the solution, and any secondary actors needed to achieve the primary actor's goal. So, what are the primary actors and the secondary actors? These are nothing but the users itself. Primary actors are the one from where the initiation happens. Secondary actors are which are supporting the actions or the use cases of the primary actor. Use cases are usually triggered by the primary actors, but in some methods may also be triggered by another system or by an external event or timer. So, for an example, you might have seen like there are sometime you are receiving the notification on the application, right? So these are the schedulers or the jobs that is been automatically been set to run or execute at certain interval time during a day or night. When that job executed, the notification comes to your mobile or applications. So these are the external or the timers that we say. So it's not necessarily that always physically a person is present or sitting there to take any action or doing something. That could be a computerized program that is triggering that case to execute, or there might be some scripts or the timers or the schedulers or the cron jobs or batch processes being set that is triggering that you know triggering that use case. So use cases, that's why it's written, use cases are usually triggered by the primary actor, but in some methods may also be triggered by another system or by an external event or the timer. There is no fixed universal format for use cases. Some use case approaches distinguish between business use cases and system use cases, with business use cases describing how actors interact with a particular process or business function, and system use cases describing the interaction between an actor and a software application. So there, as it is said, like there is no standardized representation how the use case is being represented. There might be the cases where the business use cases are different than the system use cases. In system use cases, that represents how the actors interacting with the system or the processes within the system, and in the business processes, the actors is how the actors is interacting with the business or business functions. So here you can see the use case, right? So here, just assume hypothetically that this is a kind of a website where where the user is being registered in order to see. Assume this like this is a your the application, your organization application where you are registered as an employee to to access some of the information, right? And there is an admin who is giving you access for those application, right? So assume this is your organization application where you are trying to access some of the information related to your employment, related to your salary, or related to your leaves and HR and all. So there would be a moderator, also known as the admin or the webmaster, who would be managing your role, giving you access, giving you some, allowing you some features or function of the website to use, right? So what would be the use cases for you as a user? Well, you would be going into that, login into that application. It could be here, you can see login. So you would be logging into that application, and then that would be one of the use case. The second would be that you are searching some of the document, right? You would be browsing some of the documents, you would be viewing some of the events, right? These are the use cases for the user. What do you mean by include and exclude here? So include is something that when you go, these these features included as part of the package. So you are now an employee being given access to this website where you go into login and you are able to download that document which you are viewing. uh, you can also view preview that document. So these are included, right? So just understand it in that way, that when you go in a on ATM machine, you try to withdraw the money, right? So there are different features that also included for you. For an example, you can also see the statement, you can also order the debit card, you can also set the M pin, right? So these are the features that is included, always included, right, when you are trying to access that via your ATM card, a debit or credit card. So these are the use cases, and another some of the use cases which are included as part of the package, right? As I haven't given example to you, which is always included. So included means these are uh, closely connected, and if you have an access to one use case, you can also access the another use case. Now, what are the extent? So let's say a webmaster. Webmaster is an admin, okay? So he can he has a use case to upload the documents, right? So upload documents, and you can also see here that he can. So include is basically you can relate it with the read only access, and extend you can relate it with the read and write access both, right? So admin can upload the document. So one of the use case for the webmaster is upload document, but with an extended feature that he can upload the documents. Here you can see the webmaster can has a use case to access the user, but extended the feature for the admin that he can also add the user. So here that's why it's an extended. So extended means extension of the privileges. So it could be possible that the webmaster can give you the extend feature. For an example, view event. So the as a user you can view the events, but here if you would be having the extend feature to add the events, right? So that could be the extended feature that you can edit or you can upload information externally. So hope you understand. Include is that is the part of the package that if you are having access to the one use case, then you can also do the another use case. You can have a access for the another use case. And if we say the extend is a write only feature, whereas include is a read only feature. So extend is always that allow or give you a extended privileges to do additional more updates or additional thing. So what are the elements? So hope you understand this extend and the include. So use case diagrams having a relationship, that is extend and the include. Hope you understand those. And the arrow is represented by this toward the use case. It's extend, and outside of the use case, out going out of the use case is include. That's a part of the package that you can also access. This extend is that you are given privileges to do additional thing. Use case description. And in use case description we have a name, we have a goal, we have actors, as I said, the primary and the secondary actors, the preconditions, when the it could happen, when you can do this. Preconditions like you must have a debit card in order to use the ATM machine, right? So that's a precondition. Trigger trigger is something that when you do this, then this will happen. These are the triggers. Like an example, so there would be a timer or the scheduler who would be running at certain intervals of time to push the notification to the application or to the users. So there would be triggers, and triggers could be that the timing is the trigger, or it could be like the secondary actor is performing something or the primary actor is performing something. That's only when the use case will be triggered. Flow of events, how the information or how the use case is being progressed. So then post conditions or the guarantees. So when we say post condition or guarantees are nothing but we can say, okay, if this scenario or this use case will happen, then definitely this thing will happen. That's a guarantee. So that's also known as the guarantee. Then what are the pros and the cons? Pros: use case diagrams can clarify scope and provide a high level understanding of the requirements. Use case description are easily understood by stakeholders due to their narrative flow. Use case descriptions articulate the functional behavior of a system. Whereas the cons, there are a lot of cons. The flexibility of the use case diagrams format may lead to information being embedded that would be better captured using other techniques such as user interface interaction, non-functional requirement, and business rules. So, so when we say the use case is nothing but the high level representation of the need. But what exactly happens inside when something like one use case will be executed or triggered, that would be represented by the known functional or the functional documentation or the interaction flow diagram or the business rules that can give you more detailed information, but use case does not give you more. These are like the high level picture of the requirements. Decision and the business rules that define them should not be recorded directly in use cases, but managed separately and linked from the appropriate steps. So, as I said, like these are the high level requirements. So, the decision and the business rules that define them should not be recorded. So, these are part of like your detailed information. Okay. So, when you create any story, use case, and then based on the use case you create a story, and in that story you put each and every information, right? The business rules, the acceptance criterias, and all. The flexible format of use case may result in capturing inappropriate or unnecessary detail in attempt to show every step or so as I said, like the use case, there is no standardized format of representing the use case, which lead to the uh, you know non-standardized formats of the use cases. So might be something is being captured and something not captured. So that's why it's no, the chances are high that user might even put unnecessary information or might miss some of the information. Use cases intentionally do not relate to the design of the solution, and as a result, significant efforts may be required in development to map use cases step to software. So people who are only going through the use cases and the scenarios might ends up with incomplete information, and would might ends up creating or developing something which is exactly not part of the requirement. So when we say the use cases, that is always followed by the stories, and then the story is always followed by the solution in place, the context, the constraints, the dependencies, the assumptions, right? The business value, and then we generally generate an acceptance criteria pertaining to that user story. Then only the development happens, and when that is delivered with the proper UAT and BAT, that is when we say the story is completed. So if you are dependent just on the use case or scenario, that's not correct. So that's it from this session, and I hope you understand those three techniques, which is data flow diagram, the sequence diagram, and the use cases and the scenarios. And I hope you are liking my YouTube tutorials. Please feel free to comment and feedback me that how you are finding this content. I'll continue with these sessions, and I hope there are only few techniques that is left, and will soon cover all of them. Till then, take care and goodbye.